The voicemail played again, each word slicing deeper than the last. Mark and I are in love. He's planning to leave you. I thought you deserved to know. Jessica's voice dripped with false sympathy. The kind reserved for crushing someone while pretending to do them a favor. I'm Ruby, and until 3 minutes ago, I thought I had a perfectly stable marriage. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't do it. Instead, I hit replay for the 4th time, analyzing every inflection, every pause, searching for the lie I desperately wanted to find. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m., right in the middle of the charity gala my mother-in-law Diane had insisted I skip because someone needs to keep things running at home. The pieces clicked together like a corrupt puzzle. Diane's constant hints about Mark needing a more traditional wife. Her disapproving glances at my laptop during family dinners. The way she'd started inviting Jessica to every family function, praising her artistic soul and maternal instincts. My hands shook as I pulled up Mark's location on my phone. The blue dot pulsed mockingly at the address of the gala. I zoomed in closer, imagining him there, probably standing too close to Jessica, probably letting his mother orchestrate this whole thing. The phone buzzed, speaking of the devil. Ruby, sweetheart, Diane's voice was honey-coated poison. The gala is absolutely wonderful. Mark's giving his speech soon. Such a shame you couldn't make it. Is Jessica there? The words escaped before I could stop them. A pause. Too long to be innocent. Oh yes, she did such a lovely job with the event graphics. You really should see them. I bet she did. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times Diane had pushed Jessica into our orbit. The poor thing, all alone at Christmas, she'd say. Or Jessica's so talented, Mark. Wouldn't she be perfect for your department's rebranding? I have to go, I said, cutting off whatever manipulation Diane was about to attempt. Work emergency. Another pause. Of course it is. Always work with you, isn't it? I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the darkened computer screen. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd started her day coding peacefully this morning. That woman was gone. In her place was someone with ice in her veins and fire in her heart. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up Mark's email account, the one he thought I didn't know about. The truth was waiting there. I just had to find it. And when I did, they'd all learn that the career-focused wife they'd underestimated had more than enough skills to destroy their carefully constructed lies. Mark came home late, reeking of expensive wine and wearing the carefully disheveled look he'd perfected for networking events. I watched him from my laptop screen, pretending to work while tracking every micro-expression that crossed his face. How was the gala? I kept my voice neutral, the way I did during software debugging, methodical, searching for errors in the system. Good. Great turnout. He loosened his tie, avoiding my eyes. Mother said she called you. Sorry you couldn't make it. Jessica's graphics were a hit, I heard. His hands froze on his collar. Just for a second, but long enough. Were they? I didn't really notice. I pulled up the email I'd found earlier, the one where he'd praised her designs in far more intimate terms than a boss should use. But I didn't mention it. Not yet. Instead, I said, your mother invited us to dinner tomorrow night. Did she? His relief was palpable. That's nice. She specifically mentioned Jessica would be there. To discuss the holiday fundraiser graphics. Mark poured himself a whiskey, his third tell of the night. Mother's always networking. You know how she is. I did know. I'd spent 8 years watching Diane weave her web of social connections, each strand carefully calculated. The holiday fundraiser was her crown jewel, her chance to parade her perfect son in front of her country club friends. Last year, she'd cornered me at it, wineglass in hand, asking when I'd finally give her grandchildren. Your biological clock isn't getting any younger, dear, she'd said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I'll go to dinner, I said, closing my laptop. I think it's time I got more involved in the family charity work, don't you? Mark's glass paused halfway to his lips. You're always so busy with work. Things change. I stood up, gathering my things. By the way, your mother mentioned something interesting today. About fresh starts. The whiskey glass clinked against his teeth. Did she? We should talk about that sometime. About fresh starts. And second chances. I headed for the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Mark? You have lipstick on your collar. Wrong shade for a marketing executive to be wearing, don't you think? I didn't wait for his response. I could already picture tomorrow's dinner, Diane's practiced smiles, Jessica's calculated modesty, Mark's nervous glances. They thought they were the players in this game. They hadn't realized yet that they were the pieces, and I was about to reset the board. Diane's dining room felt like a stage set, with everyone playing their assigned roles. Jessica sat across from me, her designer dress carefully selected to match the table centerpiece. Mark kept shifting in his chair, while Diane orchestrated her performance from the head of the table. The holiday fundraiser needs a fresh perspective, Diane announced, cutting into her roast. Jessica's mock-ups are exactly what we need. So modern, yet traditional. I scrolled through my phone under the table, pulling up the email thread I'd discovered that morning. Speaking of modern approaches, I found something interesting in the Foundation's digital archives. Diane's knife scraped against her plate. Archives? The board meeting minutes from last month. Fascinating reading. I looked directly at Jessica. Especially the part about the graphic design budget. Nearly triple last year's amount. Jessica's smile flickered. Mark stopped chewing. Well, quality work demands proper compensation, Diane said smoothly. Funny thing about digital records, I continued, taking a sip of wine. They leave such clear trails. Like email timestamps. Hotel reservations. Money transfers. The color drained from Mark's face. I pulled up a photo on my phone and slid it across the table. It showed Mark and Jessica at the Paradise Hotel bar, dated 3 months ago, when he was supposedly at a marketing conference in Seattle. Ruby, Mark started, but I cut him off. The really interesting part is the Foundation's new account. The one opened last month, with a $100,000 deposit. I turned to Diane. Quite generous of you to fund Mark and Jessica's fresh start. The crystal wine glass in Diane's hand trembled. You've been hacking. Following digital breadcrumbs, I corrected. It's amazing what people leave lying around when they think no one's looking. Like wedding venue inquiries. House listings. Divorce lawyer consultations. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. This is ridiculous. Mark, tell her. Tell me what? I asked. About the baby? Don't worry, I found those medical records too. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark's face went from white to green. Diane's perfect mask cracked as she turned to Jessica, who had wrapped her arms protectively around her midsection. You're pregnant? Diane's voice shook. But the plan was to wait until. Until what, Mother? I stood up, gathering my things. Until the divorce was final? Until you'd secured your perfect daughter-in-law replacement? Or until you'd finished embezzling Foundation money to fund their new life? I headed for the door, then paused. By the way, I sent copies of everything to the Foundation board. They're probably reading them right now. I hear they take financial misconduct very seriously. Behind me, chaos erupted. But I didn't look back. I had more files to release, more dominoes to topple. This was just the opening move. The foundation's parking lot was empty except for Paul's car and mine. 3 a.m, and my hands still shook from the dinner's aftermath. Paul listened as I scrolled through the evidence on my laptop, his lawyer's mind cataloging every detail. They've been planning this for months, I said, pulling up bank statements. Diane's been siphoning money through fake vendor accounts, all registered to shell companies in Jessica's name. Paul leaned closer to the screen. This is more than just an affair, Ruby. This is systematic fraud. I know. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The question is, what do I do with it? Legally speaking, Paul started, but my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You really want to play this game? I have dirt too. Jay. Another buzz. A photo appeared, me entering Paul's office building last week. The timestamp showed late evening. They're trying to flip the narrative, Paul said, his jaw tightening. Make it look like we're having an affair. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Diane's fingerprints are all over this. It's her specialty, twisting the truth until it breaks. My phone lit up again. This time, it was Mark. Mother's in the hospital. Stress-induced collapse. Are you happy now? Don't respond, Paul warned, but I was already standing up, gathering my things. Ruby, wait. This is exactly what they want, to make you feel guilty, to make you stop. I'm not stopping. I closed my laptop with more force than necessary. But I need to see this for myself. Why? So Diane can play victim while Jessica takes photos of you looking callous at the hospital? I paused at the door. No. So I can remind them that every move they make, I'm 3 steps ahead. I didn't just find their evidence, Paul. I found their playbook. What do you mean? Diane's got a pattern. She did this before, drove away Mark's college girlfriend with rumors and manipulated evidence. Then his first fiancé. I turned back to Paul. But she made one mistake this time. What's that? She didn't realize she was dealing with someone who knows how to break encryption. I found her old emails, her templates for destruction. Everything she's doing now, she's done before. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And now I'm going to use her own playbook against her. Paul stood up. Ruby, revenge isn't. This isn't about revenge anymore. I checked my phone as another message came in. This is about justice. For every woman she's destroyed. For every life she's ruined thinking she was protecting her son. I stepped into the dark parking lot, my heels clicking against the asphalt. They wanted to play games? Fine. Let's play. The hospital corridor stretched before me like a battlefield. Through the window of Diane's private room, I watched Mark hover over his mother's bed while Jessica paced nearby. One hand protectively over her stomach. The perfect family tableau, except for the laptop I carried, loaded with enough evidence to shatter their carefully constructed world. Mrs. Thompson? A nurse approached with a clipboard. Your mother-in-law's asking for you. I stepped into the room, the weight of the laptop heavy against my side. Diane lay against the pillows, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Ruby, she said, voice weak but calculated. I hope you're satisfied. Actually, I set my laptop on the bedside table. I brought something that might help you feel better. Some light reading about the foundation's finances. Jessica stopped pacing. Mark's hand tightened on the bed rail. This isn't the time, Mark started, but Diane raised a trembling hand. No, let's hear what she has to say. Since she's so determined to destroy this family. I opened the laptop, turning it toward them. Funny choice of words. Because I found something interesting in your old emails. About Mark's college girlfriend, Sarah? And Catherine, his first fiancée? I clicked through documents. The same pattern. Accusations of affairs. Mysterious photos. Convenient evidence of wrongdoing. Diane's heart monitor picked up speed. Mother? Mark's voice cracked. What is she talking about? But here's the real surprise, I continued, pulling up another file. The Foundation's original board members. Specifically, Sarah's father and Catherine's uncle. Both forced to resign after financial scandals. Scandals that started right after their relationships with Mark ended. Jessica moved closer, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. Mark, what's going on? I did what was necessary, Diane said, her weakness suddenly gone. They weren't right for him. Just like you're not. By destroying their families? Their reputations? I turned to Mark. And now she's doing it again. The money she's been funneling through Jessica's companies? It's not for your fresh start. It's insurance. Leverage to control her too. Jessica's face went pale. What? Show them the transfers, Diane snapped, but her voice shook. Show them your proof. I closed the laptop. I already did. The board received everything an hour ago. They're meeting tomorrow morning. The room erupted in chaos. Mark lunged for the laptop, Jessica backed toward the door, and Diane's monitor shrieked as her pulse spiked. I stepped back, watching their perfect facade crumble. But instead of satisfaction, I felt something else. Something that tasted like ash in my mouth. Because in that moment, I realized I'd become exactly what Diane was, someone who destroyed lives in the name of justice. The question was, could I live with that? The Foundation's emergency board meeting felt like an execution chamber. 12 pairs of eyes watched me from around the mahogany table as I connected my laptop to the projector. Behind me, Mark and Jessica sat separately, both summoned by the board's urgent notice. Diane's empty chair loomed like an accusation. Before we begin, Board Chairman Reynolds adjusted his glasses. We've received some concerning communications from Diane Thompson. My fingers froze on the keyboard. What kind of communications? Emails. Dating back months. Suggesting you've been attempting to sabotage the Foundation through unauthorized access to our systems. The room tilted slightly. I looked at Mark, who wouldn't meet my eyes. That's impossible, I said, but Reynolds was already sliding documents across the table. Your login credentials were used to transfer funds, alter records, create false evidence of embezzlement. He paused. All while you were supposedly investigating others. Jessica stood up, her voice trembling. The companies under my name, they were all legitimate contracts. I have the paperwork. Yes, Reynolds nodded. Diane provided those too. Along with evidence that Mrs. Thompson here attempted to frame you and Mrs. Thompson for financial misconduct. My laptop screen flickered to life, displaying not my carefully gathered evidence, but a very different set of records. Records showing my apparent attempts to hack the system, plant false evidence, destroy reputations. I can explain, I started, but Mark finally spoke. Can you explain this too? He held up his phone, showing an email thread between me and Paul, discussing ways to manipulate evidence. Except I'd never written those emails. These aren't real, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Check the metadata, the server logs. Already done, Reynolds interrupted. The board has reviewed everything. We've also contacted the police. The room spun faster. Diane had outplayed me completely. She'd used my own tactics against me, twisted everything I'd discovered into a weapon. And I'd walked right into her trap. You really thought you could beat my mother at her own game? Mark's voice was quiet, almost pitying. She's been doing this for decades. You just gave her exactly what she needed, a perfect scapegoat. Footsteps in the hallway. 2 police officers entered the room. Ruby Thompson, one asked. We need you to come with us. As they led me out, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the boardroom's glass wall. I saw what everyone else saw, not a righteous avenger, but just another person destroyed by their own desire for revenge. And somewhere in a hospital room, I knew Diane was smiling. Paul visited me in the holding cell, his lawyer face firmly in place. But instead of legal papers, he carried a single USB drive. Remember that backup server you asked me to monitor? He slid the drive through the bars. It caught something interesting last night. Multiple logins to the Foundation system from Diane's hospital room. My hands shook as I held the drive. They won't let me near a computer. They will for this. He tapped his briefcase. Because I've also got signed statements from Sarah and Catherine. Seems your investigation inspired them to finally talk about what Diane did to them. 3 hours later, I stood in Diane's hospital room. She sat upright in bed, perfectly coiffed despite the monitors and 4 lines. Mark and Jessica flanked her like royal guards. Come to confess? Diane's smile was razor thin. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Actually, I came to show you something. Your latest login attempts to the Foundation system. The ones you made while supposedly sedated. The heart monitor's steady beep faltered. Mother? Mark stepped forward. What is she talking about? More lies, Diane snapped, but her voice wavered. The system logs everything, Diane. Including the fact that you used Sarah's father's old login credentials. The ones you stole years ago when you first started destroying lives. Jessica's hand dropped from her stomach. Mark, what's happening? Show them, I told Paul, who opened his briefcase and began distributing documents. Show them how the pattern repeats. How every time Mark got close to someone you couldn't control, you destroyed them. Their families. Their reputations. Their lives. I protected him, Diane's voice rose. From women like you who would take him away from me. No, Mark's voice cracked as he read the statements. You destroyed everyone I loved. Including Ruby. Including me? Jessica asked quietly. Diane's facade finally shattered. You were supposed to be perfect. Both of you. But you're just like her, ungrateful, ambitious, thinking you can take my son. Your son? I laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Look at him, Diane. Really look. He's not your possession. He's your victim. The monitors shrieked as Diane lunged for my laptop, but her weakness wasn't an act this time. She collapsed back, gasping, as decades of manipulation unraveled around her. The board has everything now, I said quietly. The real evidence. Your confession is just a formality. Mark touched his mother's hand, then let it fall. It's over, Mother. All of it. I walked out of the room, leaving behind the wreckage of a family built on lies. But as the door closed, I heard Diane's whisper. You've become exactly like me, Ruby. And you'll never be free of it. I kept walking, because the worst part was, she might be right. The divorce papers sat unsigned on my desk while I packed the last of my office belongings. Outside my window, the Foundation's new board members arrived for their first meeting, faces I'd never seen before. Untouched by years of Diane's manipulation. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, Mother's asking for you. One last time. I almost deleted it. But something in me needed this final scene. Diane's new room at the rehabilitation center felt smaller than her hospital suite. She sat by the window, her perfect posture unchanged, though everything else about her had diminished. Come to gloat? Her voice was weaker, but the edge remained. No. I set a manila envelope on her lap. I came to give you these. She opened it slowly, pulling out photographs. Her face changed as she recognized them: Sarah's wedding invitation, Catherine's birth announcement for her first child, Jessica's ultrasound. How? They all moved on, Diane. Built new lives after you destroyed their old ones. I thought you should see what you failed to prevent. Her hands trembled. And you? Have you moved on? I touched my bare ring finger. I'm learning the difference between justice and revenge. Between letting go and running away. I never ran, she said sharply. No. You made everyone else run instead. She stared at the photos, touching each face gently. I thought I was protecting him. You were protecting yourself. From being alone. From losing control. I moved toward the door. The difference between us, Diane? I'm choosing to stop the cycle. Wait. She pulled one last paper from the envelope, the divorce agreement. He still loves you, you know. In his way. I know. But love isn't enough when it comes with puppet strings. I left her there, surrounded by evidence of lives that had flourished despite her best efforts to control them. In the parking lot, Paul waited with coffee and a new contract from a tech startup. Ready? He asked. I looked back at the window where Diane sat, still holding those photographs. She'd taught me more than she intended, about power, about control, about the price of revenge. But she'd also taught me what I didn't want to become. You know what the worst part is? I took the coffee, letting its warmth ground me. Part of me understands her now. How easy it would be to keep pulling strings, manipulating lives, telling myself it's for the right reasons. But you're not going to. No. I got into the car, leaving behind the weight of unfinished revenge and unsigned papers. I'm going to do something much harder. What's that? Learn to live without knowing how the story ends. We drove away, and I didn't look back to see if Diane was watching. Some strings needed to stay cut.